Out of all the interesting characters to come out of the Saw franchise, Amanda Young has to be not only the most fascinating but also the most tragic. She's the first survivor, but she lost the game. She survived her trap, but she didn't live. Played by Shawnee Smith, Amanda was the only known survivor of Jigsaw's traps, and while only being a minor character in the 2004 film, is later revealed to be the film's antagonist, working with Jigsaw as his apprentice. We're introduced to Amanda in Saw 1 where she's giving her testimony after surviving her trap, in which she wakes up with the device around her head known as the reverse bear trap, designed to wrench her jaws apart, and the only way to free herself is by...
There is only one key to open the device. It's in the stomach of your dead cellmate.
But the man was actually heavily sedated. Nevertheless, she kills him and frees herself seconds before the device springs open. There have been times, particularly in romantic tales and poetry, when purple has been associated with sensuality. I suspect that may be because of the color's association with imbibing the grape. However, during our more than 20 years of research into the effects of color on behavior, purple was not once associated with sensuality. In fact, there seemed to be no real evidence of purple having an effect in the physical realm at all. The color did, however, hold a powerful sway in the realm of the non-corporeal, the mystical, and even the paranormal. When purple is on screen, it sends a signal that someone's or something's going to die or be transformed. It is an omen for death. Bernardo in West Side Story wears a purple shirt as he dances with Anita, not knowing that in 24 hours he will be dead. In Gladiator, Marcus wears a violet hood. Visually, he is the Grim Reaper incarnate. He watches his legions demolish the barbarians, and in the next half hour of movie time, he will die. Dressed in violet, Anna from The Sixth Sense returns from the wine cellar to witness her husband's murder. But death may not always be literal. It could be youth, or love, or illusion, or dream. Max, a young boy in Rushmore, climbs a ladder to a purple bedroom and loses the delusion that he will sleep with his teacher. The purple light in Chicago is a consistent presence. Murder itself becomes the satire in the form of a song and dance act. In the flashback we see of Amanda in the reverse bear trap, she's wearing a purple off-the-shoulder top. In order to survive, she must kill, and in doing so she is transformed, reborn. She has a new appreciation for life.
He helped me.
And is then thrusted into a life that is full of death by being an apprentice. But now she's on the path of her own death. Sometime after her abduction and escaping the warehouse, Amanda was recruited by John and helped him in preparing the iconic bathroom trap for Adam and Dr. Lawrence that provides the basis for the first film. Originally, Amanda was chosen to be tested by Jigsaw because she was going to therapy, as written in the original script, with Jigsaw saying, "This is better though, as it's free." She was actively trying to get better. She wanted to get better. We meet Amanda again in Saw 2, where it's revealed that she's a heroin addict, having started her addiction in jail after being framed for a crime she didn't commit. This film is where I feel she truly loses herself. Many believe she's just playing a role, going along as Jigsaw's right-hand woman, but to see how desperately she believes in humanity and forgiveness is painful. She wanted them to survive. You can see it in the way she's shown to be horrified by the acts of selfishness and cruelty. The way she holds and comforts Laura in her arms and cries when she dies. Her look of terror when Obi burns in the furnace trap. That's why people who think Amanda is a remorseless killer will always be odd to me. How do you watch as she sorrowfully goes into the bathroom, whispering gently to Adam that she was going to free him, and think this is what she wants? Shawnee Smith has even said that acting this scene was like a sister going into her older brother's room for comfort. The way she sobbed and clung onto Adam's body when he died in her arms. Blue can be a tranquil pond or a soft blanket of sadness. It is quiet and aloof. When we see Amanda again in Saw 2, she's dressed in blue, a basic pale blue shirt and denim blue hospital pants. Pale blue is the quintessential color of powerlessness and can also signify helpless. You can see how powerless and helpless she feels when the first thing she does after waking up in the house trap is to instantly start clutching her head as if she was back in the reverse bear trap, clearly a trauma response. You can see her helpless again after she's thrown into the needle pit, and this is where I believe her hope in humanity breaks. Seeing how cruel and selfish people can be, But even though she could have just cried and begged to be helped out, she looks for the key anyway. Despite thinking Xavier is the least deserving of it, she tries to give him his chance. She really wanted to survive. She wanted to believe in John's philosophy. Xavier put the final crack in her hope for humanity and does irreversible damage to her views to John's philosophy, but it's Eric Matthews who fully shatters it and unlocks the violent side of her. Both of the Matthews men play a significant part in Amanda's life. Eric is who started the series of events that eventually lead to Amanda's destruction, but Daniel was one of the few who tried to save her. Amanda appears in the house trap along with others who had been framed by Eric for crimes they didn't commit. Also in the trap was his son Daniel. Daniel, who was only in the trap to punish his father, is one of the only people to show Amanda genuine kindness. Others being Adam and Lynn. He's constantly kind to everyone. Him and Amanda are the only ones to be genuinely worried about Laura, who's weakening faster than everyone else. He's concerned for Jonathan and Addison, looks frightened at what happens to Obi. He even tries reasoning with Xavier. This 15-year-old kid terrified thinking that he's going to die but still wants to help people, and Amanda can see that. She forms an emotional connection to him, caring about him and protecting him more than she needs to, albeit for ulterior motives at first. She had to keep Daniel alive for Eric's game. He genuinely asked her questions about her and her first game. He's the first and only one to comfort her after the needle pit, pulling the needles out of her arms, and defends her and even contemplates jumping into the pit himself to save her. He even goes as far as to kill Xavier just to protect her. Yes, Amanda had to keep him alive because he's just supposed to be a pawn in Eric's game, but she deeply cared for him. Daniel saved Amanda's life, but in other respects, his actions killed her hope in the same instant. Had he not been there, had he not been nice, she would have died, because John failed to take into account that testing her again would ensure her survival. Amanda briefly appears in the Scott Tibbs documentary, set during and after the events of Saw 2. She punches a reporter who harassed her for information about her experience being captured by Jigsaw. And I just want to take this time to appreciate her pants. I mean, not a want, but a need. Bright red is like visual caffeine. It can activate your libido or make you aggressive, anxious, or compulsive. Red signifies rage and passion. In Saw 3, Amanda wears a red top, and it's here we see her at her most volatile. Her relationship with John has hit a rough patch. She's deeply conflicted with herself after discovering Hoffman's letter and is anxious about John's health. We see her in this film having severe outbursts and breakdowns. Red also signifies blood. By the end of the movie, she's surrounded by not only the blood of others, but also her own. Amanda throughout Saw 3 is depicted as straying away from John's philosophy and creating her inescapable traps regardless of whether or not the person successfully completes their test. The entirety of this movie is actually Amanda's test that John puts her through to see if she is still stable enough to carry on his work. She has to work with Dr. Lynn Denlin to keep him alive, while she also oversees the test of Jeff Denlin. There's a lot of misinterpretation when it comes to Amanda's motives, particularly when it comes to John, who Amanda has gone on to say she views as a father. With people thinking she's in love with John, some even going as far as to say, and quote, she kills people because she has jealous girlfriend syndrome. She doesn't want others to survive because she wants to be the only one so that she can have all of John's attention to herself. Here's a woman that has been through a brain-breaking trauma and is stuck in a terrifying position with literally no escape, and you reduce her down to woman crazy. Okay. There's a lot to be said about how the people who have a damaging impact on her life are men, from her father to Eric to Cecil to John to Xavier and Hoffman. Canonically, in the original Saw 3 script and only implied in the film, Amanda suffered abuse as a child by the hands of her father. Eric is the reason she ended up in the hands of most of these men. Him planting evidence and putting her in jail leads to her addiction. That is what causes her to meet Cecil and become an accessory to Jill's miscarriage, get tested, be taken under John's wing, see Xavier's brutality, and be set up to fail by Hoffman. It's Eric's inhumanity and abuse of power that causes an irreparable impact on Amanda's life. He imprisons her and kicks off the previously mentioned chain of events. He ultimately ends up being the first person she tries to kill out of spite and hatred. After that, she is changed irrevocably. It was that incident which caused her to stray from John's philosophy. Daniel's kindness alone wasn't enough to save her from the path that other men had already set her on. At the point in the story where she starts to rig her traps, Amanda was tested about 2 years ago. She has spent 2 years with the man who created her trauma and who tells her that it was a good thing that he did that to her, but has received no help in dealing with it because he lied to her and convinced her that he has changed her, that she has been reborn into a better person, and that as long as she has him and his legacy, she doesn't need anything or anybody else. And that makes this scene even more sad.
We're fine, Amanda. We don't need you. I said we're fine.
Amanda was the first one to survive, so she's in this position where she is expected to carry on John's legacy after he passes. She's supposed to be the example that proves others can be rehabilitated, that John's methods are effective, but they aren't. Amanda is still broken, and she knows that. She may not be doing drugs anymore, but she still has a toxic dependence and a strong want for something to take away the pain she constantly feels. She continues to do mental and bodily harm to herself by relying too much on John and self-harm. Since his methods don't work, she starts to have a different perspective on the tests and the reasons for them. Amanda's in an awful state mentally, and in the midst of her pain and self-loathing comes to the belief that no one is good and that no one is capable of reform.
Nobody is reborn. It's all bullshit.
But even though she doesn't trust his ideology anymore, she's too far in, she can't leave. She doesn't have an out. She never had an out the second she survived her first test. Having already endured several abuse from the police, is involved in the murder of John's unborn son Gideon when she, desperate for drugs, sent Cecil into Jill's clinic to steal some for her. John, not knowing about Amanda's involvement, puts her in a death trap where she has to take the life of another in a matter of life and death. And after escaping, the police are somehow involved. It was an act of self-defense, however, the police have framed her for crimes she didn't commit, and this is murder we're talking about. It's safe to assume that she didn't call them. So this is trauma on top of trauma. And after their interrogation, where they make her retell a traumatizing event, after all of that, John appears, recruiting her in his mission to quote-unquote save people. Mind you, she already knows who he is. She knows that he doesn't know what she's done, and if he finds out, she's done for. So, she says yes. From then on, she's never had an out. She becomes his ideal apprentice. She doesn't believe his ideologies anymore, but she plays the part, designing unbeatable games. She never gives people the chance to change while feeding into the illusions of John's work. To Amanda, people can't grow and change. Everyone is born evil. They can't be reborn and appreciate life. It's better she kills them now in order to save them from having to face that terrible truth.
It's a lie. She hasn't changed because nobody fucking changes. It's all a fucking lie.
Despite the fact that she is angry at the world, she still wants to think that humans can be good, that humans will make sacrifices and save each other, but she is surrounded by so much cruelty that it drowns out the good. It's why she gets overwhelmed when she receives genuine kindness. Adam is kind to her for just a moment, but it's enough to haunt her to the point that she tries to save him and cries while holding his body. She didn't want him to suffer, and to Amanda, a mercy kill is a save. Daniel's genuine kindness causes her to form an emotional connection with him. Even Lynn's kindness is enough to make her falter. She doesn't want to shoot Lynn, who's been sympathetic towards her despite her cruelty, and looks away while she cries in despair when she pulls the trigger. Amanda was able to conceive of herself as deserving of life, but she didn't think she was capable of changing. Therefore, she assumed that most people weren't deserving of life because nobody changed for the better. In her mind, it's better to be dead than to live in a cruel world where nothing and nobody ever changes. Amanda doesn't kill because she's some bloodthirsty serial killer. There's only two people she's killed by her own hand: Adam, whose body she holds and has a breakdown, and Lynn, who she shoots because she feels she didn't have a choice. She shot her out of fear. Fear for her life, fear for what John will do if he found out the truth. The pain in her face as she points the gun at Lynn, and the fact that Amanda can't even look at Lynn as she pulls the trigger should be enough to tell you that she doesn't enjoy this. She just wants to survive. She's been having to survive since the start, trying her hardest to prevent John from finding out about Gideon. All she wanted was to be loved, but looked in all the wrong places, and her ideas of love were corrupt. She cares about John, she loves him, and wants his affection and approval. She believes that the only way to get it is to keep doing what he asks. But also, I mean, I'd lose faith in humanity and start rigging traps too if I was thrown into a needle pit. Carrie is the only death that she willingly watches and doesn't show severe distress and anguish. Carrie is a cop who was very close with Eric, and Amanda knew that. She knew Carrie was desperate to find him and that she still saw highly of him, even after knowing what he did to the others. She wanted Carrie to understand she was the one responsible for everything. Amanda doesn't look proud, she doesn't wear a smirk as Carrie dies, she just stands there. She doesn't enjoy killing others, but she's also not going to show mercy for a cop. At this point in her life, hurting others and being hurt are a comfort to her. It's all she knows. It's another form of self-harm. When she hurts others, she hurts herself in the process. Punishing others because she believes that nobody is nice, lovable, or deserving of forgiveness, even herself. At the end of her life, Amanda is begging and pleading to be fixed.
I've tried to help you, Amanda.
So help me! Fix me! Fix me, motherfucker!
Which makes her death all that more haunting and heartbreaking. That look of shock in her eyes, the helpless way she looks to John for comfort and reaches out to him with her last breaths. Yes, she lost faith in his philosophy, but not her loyalty to John himself. She doesn't want to be alone, only for her hand to drop bloodied and empty to the ground. It's deeply upsetting how this woman, who's been isolated and freshly traumatized and already had such a rough life, is thrown into a world of violence and blood by the man who gave her trauma in the first place and grooms her into torturing people with him. She loves him, but she's terrified of him and what he can do to her. John is the only person she has. He's her father figure, her mentor, her only friend. That's why it's painful to watch as she goes off to hurt herself after John snaps at her. The intense emotions she's feeling are too much for her to handle. It's not until she reaches her breaking point that she snaps back at him.
And I'm just a pawn in your stupid game. I don't mean anything to you.
It's actually kinda insane how Amanda gets labeled the cold-blooded killer when Hoffman is right there and is actually enjoying himself and the pain he causes others. Even though she rigged her traps, it was sort of compassionate in the sense that Amanda's traps killed people instantly, unlike John's, who had people climb through barbed wire or walk around a tiny space covered in gasoline holding a lighter. I will say the only trap Amanda went too far on was the classroom trap. There was no way for that man to get free and remove that chain from his jaw, and even if he some way somehow managed to do that, Amanda had welded the door shut. So like, Mandy, honey, that's overkill. It pains me to say, but Amanda was better off dying in her trap, and I think she realized that too. Surviving didn't save her, it destroyed her. Very few people actually do survive Jigsaw's traps, but Amanda had such an extreme will to survive, and I think that's something that compelled John to her. And it's her desperate will to live that makes her decision to shoot Lynn that much more painful. Shooting Lynn means killing Lynn, and if Lynn dies, John dies. She'd rather the only person she has be dead than despise her. Amanda has been a dead woman walking ever since she escaped her trap and saw one. She had such a desperate wish to live, and wishes don't last forever.